Welcome to the Bitcoin Source, your ultimate destination for everything Bitcoin. Today we have an exciting guest with us, Ian. To get things started, Ian, could you start by introducing yourself to the world and to the audience?
Dadu, first of all, it's an honor and a privilege being here at the Bitcoin Source. Thank you so much for hosting me today. It's somewhat strange being on the other side of the podcast when I'm the guest rather than the host. But my name's Ian, and I'm known as Questioning Bitcoin on socials, and I'm one of the two hosts for a Bitcoin focused podcast called Rabbit Hole Stories. And our mission is to speak to as many different people as we can within the Bitcoin ecosystem to fully understand how they got into Bitcoin, how they discovered it, what was their first touch point, and what is it they're doing in the space now. And we just sort of venture down each of our guests' Bitcoin rabbit hole, and we just see where we end up. So it's more of like a facilitative way, more personal approach when we're discussing Bitcoin. We branch off into all different branches within this rabbit hole, and sometimes we're talking about politics or economics or religion and all different aspects of life and how intertwined it is with Bitcoin. So yeah, it's quite an exciting podcast for me and Joel, my fellow hosts, to sort of listen to these people's journey through the Bitcoin rabbit hole.
Yeah, Ian, I agree. I had a lot of fun on Rabbit Hole Stories with you and Joel. I found that podcast to be really insightful. And what's good about you guys' podcast is that I really like the new energy that you guys are bringing to the podcasting world. Like I said previously, um, the podcast Bitcoin ecosystem is kind of inundated with a lot of different people talking about kind of a lot of the same things. And, it's really rare to see some guys coming out of the UK outside of Peter McCormick talking about Bitcoin. So I'm definitely excited to see more of what you guys are going to roll out for 2024. And you're just getting started. So I'm always here to support you guys and push the narrative forward to the next level.
Hey there, fellow Bitcoin enthusiasts. We just wanted to take a moment to appreciate you for tuning in to the Bitcoin Source, a Bitcoin conversation. Your support means the world to us as we dive into the exciting world of Bitcoin, blockchain, and all things cryptocurrency. If you've been enjoying our content, don't forget to hit that like button. It's like a virtual high five that keeps us motivated. And hey, sharing is caring. If you know someone who'd geek out over Bitcoin as much as we do, hit that share button. Finally, if you want to stay up to date with all our latest episodes and insights, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss a single update. Thanks for being a part of our community. Keep exploring, and remember, the future is decentralized. Now back to the episode.
It means so much to me when you say that, because obviously you were one of our guests, and as you probably experienced, we're very intrigued with the guests that we have on. We want to fully understand what it is that they see Bitcoin to be and its potential, and how they've brought in their own expertise and experiences within the space, and how they sort of contribute in that wealth of knowledge into the space. And obviously you're no exception to helping me understand, because part of the value I find in doing it with the podcast is I'm listening to all these different journeys, all these different touch points, and all these different specialisms that people bring into the space. And it's an opportunity for not only our listeners or viewers to learn more, but for me as well, because I'm just like everyone else down this Bitcoin rabbit hole, trying to figure out the complexities that it has, and the different branches of opinion and voices it has. And it's just a constant learning curve for me. And once you fall down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, for me personally, it's an opportunity for us to sort of really question and reflect our own realities based on the legacy narratives that we've been fed all our lives. And I can't think of anything more valuable than speaking to fellow Bitcoiners, not only at meetups, but on rabbit hole stories around the world. We've touched nearly every single continent in the world since the year that we've started rabbit hole stories, and it's great to see all these different sort of perspectives coming into the.
100%, 100%. I couldn't agree with that more. And I kind of want to expound a little bit more, Ian, on your rabbit hole journey and just you kind of coming and formulating the creation of Bitcoin rabbit hole stories. So, what pivotal moments or realizations have shaped your understanding of Bitcoin since you first entered the space in 2020?
Well, that's how deep you want to go, Dadu. But Bitcoin for me was something that I didn't know I was always looking for until I found it. And once I found it, it was the key to sort of expanding my understanding or some discomforts I might have had in the environments that I grew up in and all that kind of stuff. And I was able to sort of really see with the first time with some clarity as to how the system operates on a meta scale, and it sent me on the journey of self reflection and looking back. But my first touch point with Bitcoin must have been around 2011, because at the time I was working shift work. I was doing a full time job. I was a police officer in the Metropolitan Police in London, and that's a whole new story we can get into in another day, Dadu. But prior to that, well, during my time in the police, I was in debt. I had a mortgage. I was fully tied into the sort of fiat dream, right? Buy a house, have a family, work hard, and you'll reap the rewards when you retire with a pension and all that sort of stuff. Um, but that wasn't quite cutting it for me because the salary isn't that great in the police. And I started doing a night course to study to become a qualified electrician, just so I can sort of maybe have a second job if I needed it, or something to fall back on if I didn't want to continue staying in the police. And that was already a question that I was asking myself at the time. And in this night course, the tutor that was teaching us this course started to get involved in crypto. And it was quite early back then. He was talking about, I don't know, I can't really remember what sort of cryptos were out at the time, but obviously Bitcoin was in existence. And he was talking to us about that quite often. And he encouraged a few of us to log on to this platform where we can buy these various cryptos. And I did that. I logged on and I bought things I didn't even know what they were. I didn't know what I was putting my money down towards, right? And I'm pretty sure, although I don't know for sure, I must have bought a little bit of Bitcoin back then. But my life carried on. I was doing my shifts. I completely forgot about it. I didn't even know or remember the platform that I even logged into at the time. So I must have lost Bitcoin. I don't want to dwell on that too much, but upon later in life, when my marriage fell apart, I moved out of the house. We had to sell the house. It was a whole dramatic thing where I had to sort of get rid of quite a lot of my assets, and it took me a while to sort of get back on my feet. And upon thinking about what it is that I can maybe do now in my life moving forward, was when I started to remember about these cryptos, and I thought, I wonder what it's doing now. And I saw that the price obviously increased quite a lot since then, and I just started then throwing money back in these things again, not knowing what they were. But luckily for me, I started doing a little bit more research and scratching beneath the surface more by doing research online. I read the Bitcoin Standard, and it was whilst reading the Bitcoin Standard, mid-air in flight on the way to Las Vegas to visit my wife's family, when the penny dropped for me. And I was like, okay, obviously the rest are scams. I was already sort of thinking about them being scams already before reading the Bitcoin Standard, but that really solidified it for me. And ever since, I just fell down the Bitcoin rabbit hole to the point where I was at a London Bitcoin meetup. I was meeting a few familiar faces there that I've seen while going there a few times, and me and Joel connected straight away. And he was already thinking, already established, well established in the space before I ever was. And he was thinking about putting some content out there. And we said, do you know what? Why don't we just do it and give it a try? And that was the birth of Rabbit Hole Stories. And we haven't looked back ever since. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I love that story. I just find that the two energies combining you and Joel, they're just so organic. They're so authentic. Like, of course, podcast hosts always have a great synergy, but there's just something unique about you two guys doing rabbit hole stories that I just find very intriguing, and that's why I was fully on board to become a guest on the show and talk about my Bitcoin journey. And I'm really proud and happy to see you guys continuing to push this narrative. And I only hope the best for rabbit hole stories, and I only hope the best for Bitcoin because ultimately this is a digital asset that is not only going to help us, but it's going to help the world globally. And I think that that's extremely important, and that's the narrative that we need to continue to push, especially as we see the conversation of Bitcoin heating up, the ETF stuff coming around, and a lot of people are going to start asking questions, and they're going to be hungry for content and for educational platforms such as Rabbit Hole Stories.
Yeah, that's reassuring to hear, and thank you for that feedback. And I kind of see these stories as time capsules, as an archive of stories that people can go back on. And people's journeys evolve, right? They continue and they grow. So we might have had a guest on, like yourself, Dardu, who at the time came on, had these sets of ideas and experiences within the Bitcoin space, and we're always open to re-inviting people to continue that conversation and continue that journey down into the Bitcoin rabbit hole. Have they now changed their mindset since their original sort of appearance in rabbit hole stories? So we want to sort of not only encapsulate these moments in time, but also allow further exploration if needed, as the bottomless rabbit hole that we are exploring, right? We have epiphanies and insights all the time. And we're always open to having that continual conversation. And our approach at Rabbit Hole Stories is, there might be, and there has been guests that have come on that have said their opinions about certain things that I might not necessarily agreed with. But what we are very mindful of is that it's our guest's rabbit hole story. It's not for me and Joel to sort of, intersect and interject and things like that. We want to nurture their journey as much as everyone else, right? So that's the whole sort of premise of what we do. So thank you for that positive feedback. It means a lot.
Yes, thank you. Likewise. Ian, as someone that's deeply immersed in the world of Bitcoin, can you elaborate on the specific principles that you hold dear, and how has these principles influenced your decision making and lifestyle choices?
Well, this is how my sort of questioning Bitcoin persona first came about, and that came about before Rabbit Hole Stories ever existed. And I was sort of thinking to myself, do you know what? I am now in this rabbit hole. There's so much now I need to reflect on and understand. There are things that I now realize I didn't really understand, but I thought I did understand, or I completely saw it from a different perspective because of narratives I was, educated around or fed from, my community and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to create a persona that was putting questions out there to the community on social media, posing simple questions, somewhat philosophical questions as well, not directly always related to Bitcoin, but other sort of questions, because I like to think that other people are doing the same kind of thing. And that hopefully with through a Bitcoin lens, we can sort of have a conversation, an ongoing one, have some debate, but do it with sort of like the respecting my opinions as much as everyone else's, but meeting in the middle, coming to a consensus. So that's kind of really my sort of mode that I operate within. Prior to that, I was just sort of like always trying to figure out or fit into a slightly discomfort that I felt within society. I was trying to fit into a wedge that, or an expectation of how it is that I should live my life. But now it's made me very open minded. It's changed my spending habits. I'm not always seeking the next consumerist sort of sparkling thing or the next upgrade of an iPhone or whatever it may be. I'm more mindful about value, and not only of things, but from the communities that surround me as well. And it's sort of made me sort of remember my childhood. And I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but I grew up in a social housing, a working class family. Money was tight. My community was extremely diverse. There were Black communities, Asian communities, people from all over Europe living within the same community. And what I find interesting and what I'm really sort of focused on at the moment is our use of language in the Bitcoin space, because sometimes what I fear is, particularly when you go on X and social media, that some of the narratives might be alienating or segregating or becoming exclusive, the way and the terms that we use within the ecosystem. Because I remember sort of like, particularly when I was in the police, like police officers coming up to me saying, "Oh, you speak their lingo, Ian. Go and speak to these people and see if you can relate to them." Like this othering of people obviously signals this social structure system that we exist within. And I'm sort of wondering sometimes whether our language within the space is somewhat unhelpful. So I'm kind of trying to think of how to reach out and touch the communities that I've come from that need Bitcoin. Um, and I think that, with the decision of the ETFs that are looming upon us, obviously the price of Bitcoin is likely to skyrocket. And I want to try and get the signal out there to those communities that are disenfranchised or don't trust the system, as much as I can. So I'm sort of trying to really focus on that at the moment. And that's where I'm sort of stuck in this little language rabbit hole at the moment.
Most definitely. I love to hear that. And there were some things to unpack there that I definitely want to talk about. First, of course, you being an ex-police officer, a civil servant, you kind of have a different foundation of principles and morals and integrity that, you've kind of been instilled upon from your job description, but it also kind of plays out into your overall character and your overall life. And interestingly enough, I actually have family in London. I have family in West London. So it's interesting to see how um the culture in London in the UK is vastly different from America, at least in my opinion. I think that the UK has a huge melting pot of different cultures. You have Irish, you have English, you have Jamaican, Nigerian, all these different people kind of melting together. And then you have people that live on estates, you have people that live in manors, you have people that live in houses. And I think that those melting pots of culture is what has kind of helped you to become a better individual and to understand that the world is not just black and white. There's all levels of diversity and inclusion. And I think that that reflects back into your Bitcoin story and the way that you approach Bitcoin, because you understand that this is a digital asset that is not only just going to help the proverbial white male or white female, it's also going to help people that have never had the opportunity or the chance to get a leg up and, pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And I really commend you for kind of sticking your neck out there. And even when you were a police officer, kind of taking the unorthodox approach of going into communities and talking to people and not coming in as an overlord or someone that's just being nefarious or just trying to hammer down on crime. You actually get to a human level with them and tell them, like, you're here to protect and serve them in the community. And I think that that's what Bitcoin is doing for our finances and for our sovereign wealth. Protecting and serving us on a digital sovereign monetary asset front. So I commend you, Ian, for that. That's fire.
I don't know what to say. Thank you as well. I mean, and you're right. I live in West London as well, funnily enough. But because I actually have moved back into the same community I grew up in, and looking around this community now is completely different from when I grew up. This was all social housing around here. Now gentrification has taken place, whereas it was very multicultural, very diverse. It's very much white people here, and these diverse communities, black communities, have moved further away into poorer parts, that they can now no longer afford these houses that have been bought out by through gentrification. And yes, it's a mixing pot, but it's always shifting. There's always people trying to take advantage of cheap housing, which drives the price of housing up, right? And it drives these lower wealth families and communities away, and that compounds the being disenfranchised, because where is home for them. And I've got fond memories of being around here, and when I look around now, it's not quite the same. The sense of community is not here. And you can live in social housing, and there might be a block that you live in with like a brutalist building that's just been constructed out of concrete or whatever, and you could be looking upon the most wealthiest houses in London just across the street from you. But when they're in their houses, which are like many millions of pounds, they're looking upon this, social housing. So it's very close communities, and people sort of tend to group together quite tightly in these communities and build their own language, right? And they build these sort of, they code switch, obviously, or they have like their street lingo that are not for the people who are just around the corner. It's for that community, and they're doing that for their own protection, for their own sort of pushing back against the mainstream narratives, right? And I want to sort of like remind Bitcoiners that there are people out there that need the signal, but when we're just repeating these Western-centric, white-centric narratives that seem to be the prevailing narratives within Bitcoin at the moment, because we've got easy access to the technologies that most people don't, it's going to invite and signal to people that think like me, understand the language that's being said, and it's not quite connecting to those disenfranchised communities at the same time. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that me and you have a lot more in common than we would like to believe, Ian. That's dope. I love that story. I think that that's really organic and beautiful, and I think that you get it. We need more people in the ecosystem like yourself that honestly get it, and they understand that this is a collective kind of thing that we're pushing. This is not singular. And I think for a long time, fiat money, the way that the banking system has been structured, the way that society has been structured, it has a very centralized, singular view of exactly what does freedom look like, what does wealth generation look like, what does generational wealth look like, what does equality look like. And I think that Bitcoin represents all those things, because Bitcoin has no leader, Bitcoin has no CEO, no headquarter address. This is all open source technology that you can transfer to someone peer to peer. You can give education peer to peer. There's no blockages. There's no people stopping you from getting your message out, unless they cut the internet off, of course. But that's a possibility, but it's also going to be something that hurts the enemy as well too. So they can only keep the internet off for so long. And thinking about what you said, Ian, there's another question I had for you, which is, how do you navigate conversations with individuals who are hesitant or skeptical about Bitcoin, especially considering your own journey of questioning and self-reflection?
That's the thing, because what I found myself, I forgot uh, almost my language that I was, grew up in. My childhood, the way I sounded is not how I sound now. And that was basically conditioning of being in the police, of trying to work on effective ways of communicating with the wider mainstream society, right? And this is, and I obviously have easier access to systems that most people don't, and I've been able to use that to my advantage. And what I found myself doing, and what I forgot, is whenever anyone was ever intrigued by knowing that I'm in Bitcoin, I was,
which one's the best crypto asset? Well, Bitcoin's the best crypto asset. Okay, what's the second best? There is no second best. There's no second best crypto asset. There's a crypto asset. It's called Bitcoin, right? Right? There's no second best, okay? But take all your money, buy Bitcoin, then take all your time, figure out how to borrow more money to buy more Bitcoin, then take all your time and figure out what you can sell to buy Bitcoin. And if you absolutely love the thing that you don't want to sell it, go mortgage your house and buy Bitcoin with it. And if you've got a business that you love because your family works for the business that's in your family for 37 years and you can't bear to sell it, mortgage it, finance it, and convert the proceeds into the hardest money on earth, which is Bitcoin.
This channel is for education purposes only and is not affiliated with any financial institution. This is not financial advice. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now back to the episode.
echoing the pre-carved out narratives that are prevalent within the Bitcoin ecosystem, right? I was saying, oh, exit the system, hodl, Bitcoin makes war unaffordable, Bitcoin can't be racist. The sort of mainstream sort of accepted narratives within the Bitcoin ecosystem, right? But what I actually, upon now reflection, and which is what is now motivated me to write a paper about language and the use of language within the Bitcoin ecosystem. I'm thinking about calling it Beyond Words and how language is shaping the Bitcoin ecosystem. But that's a work in progress. But what I'm trying to sort of remember is, how can I communicate the value that Bitcoin holds for people without using these narratives that actually alienate people, right? And sometimes I'm hearing in podcasts and things like that, slavery, freedom, and it completely disregards the struggles that people have historically had, been fighting for these things for decades and hundreds of years. And all we've got is this laptop, and we're saying here, freedom, peaceful revolution, this and that and the other. And it's completely disregarding the people that have been fighting for these things well before us. So I'm really sort of trying to dig down deep and signal to people that we really need to go beyond meeting people where they're at and actually fully understand the history and the historical context of the message that we're trying to put out there.
Yes, I agree with that, Ian. I think that messaging, signaling, channeling, conversation, language is super important. I think that that's what connects us as human beings. And having a good narrative and having a clear cut message is one step in the right direction of where we want to be as far as being a human race that fully understands what Bitcoin can do and where it's going to possibly go. And of course, you're putting in your best effort to kind of make that a reality. And each one teach one. Every person in this community, every person that is doing a podcast or a blog or being a writer in this space. And I'm kind of biased because my wheelhouse, my side hustle is writing about Bitcoin and pushing content out there just like you guys are. And it's just beautiful to see different races, colors, and creeds pushing that effort along. There's no like overhead bias. Of course, there's always bias, there's always clicks, but I think that we all align within the same front of that we're Bitcoiners and that we understand where we want this thing to go. And I think that over time, that's actually going to really help us to navigate some of the negative energies or negative stipulations that we've seen in our society over the last several centuries. And I think that Bitcoin is really going to help in fighting that effort. It's not a one stop shop fix all, but it's definitely a better antidote than we've seen with pounds or euros or dollars. I think that Bitcoin kind of gives people that different option to be different and be a better person they were yesterday.
100. And that, I'm a believer that Bitcoin is for everyone, right? And I think we therefore need to be open to other ideas, other concepts, other ways of living, other structures that we might want to consider sort of evolving into, rather than sticking ourselves into what a familiar sort of view of the world looks like to us, right? We should sort of really sort of question the social structures that we have around us and challenge them and push back against them. And only by being part of that fight and opening up the conversation to expand to other ideas and concepts, then we can really sort of push back hard against the prevailing narratives that are out there. And the more people that sort of hear that slight sort of signal of power and what freedom means to them and what they've been fighting for, maybe this is the opportunity that they can get on board and be part of the conversation, rather than fear being ostracized or called out. Being welcomed into that as someone who brings value into that space, because there's no Bitcoin expert as far as I'm concerned, right? Because we're all still trying to comprehend what this abstract technology is and its capabilities and the possibilities that it can bring about in society, right? And how we can do this international sort of consensus towards trying to sort of do right by humanity and unpack all the oppressive systemic issues that keep us divided and separate from each other, and not being sort of too fearful of being sort of called, try what I struggle with is being pigeonholed, right? Because if what some people might think when they hear me speak is, oh, he's progressive or he's being woke and things like that. I hate all that stuff. Like I hate people being pigeonholed into certain things. I'm everything all at once, every time, all the time, right? I'm a mixture of things at any one time, and when we start to sort of like put one person in one place, then we start to sort of add all the stereotypes and biases that associate with that at the same time, and we really need to sort of, in my mind, stop doing that kind of stuff.
100%. And I don't want to pontificate when I say this, that I think that Bitcoiners are some of the most awesome people on the planet, because I think as we evolve as Bitcoiners and we kind of look at the psychology of what it is to be a Bitcoiner, you kind of remove yourself from this individual sovereignty and you start to have a broader, more open basis of how you think about generating wealth or passing on that love, that knowledge, that inspiration. And I have a question for you, Ian. How do you see Bitcoin playing a role in empowering people in Europe, in the UK? Because I think the US or the West has a different approach to Bitcoin than people have in the United Kingdom. Of course, the UK has the gold British pound, which is or was one of the strongest currencies in the world. And I think that because of that, that approach is different of how people from the UK look at wealth, look at money. And then you have Bitcoin being ushered into this conversation. From your experience being a UK native, how do you think Bitcoin is going to really change the way that people look at Bitcoin in Europe versus somewhere else in the world?
Well, I've got the luxury, like we alluded to earlier, of being in London in particular, and it being so diverse and lots of a melting pot of different cultures. And like in Brixton, in South London, there's this thing called the Brixton Pound, where the local community have formulated their own currency that is separate from the system, right? And that this has been going on for a long time. And the Brixton Pound, which is own currency in the area, and the shops that have signed up to this scheme, is opening up opportunities for people to buy things that they wouldn't have otherwise had access to. So, people have always, for a long time, been trying to find ways to circumvent the pound or the systems and the currency. They just don't quite fully understand how big of a problem it is globally. And I think once people start to understand how global this issue is, and how the world economy is deeply scarred and impacted and damaged by by how fiat operates, then people really can, and as I said earlier, come together. A mixture of different communities can blend. And I remember going to people's houses when I was a kid, eating saltfish dumplings and jerk chicken and jollof and onion bhajis. And do you know what? I loved it. It was great because people's ideas can merge, they can mix, they can expand. And I think that's for me the hope that Bitcoin can bring about, is we can bring in our difference and make something together that is for the benefit of everyone else.
Yes, 100%. Shout out to that Joloff. That's my Ghanaian side of my family will appreciate you saying that. So thank you bringing up that Joloff, Ian. That's dope. In your view, Ian, how is Bitcoin reshaping the traditional finance system, in your opinion? Like when you have guests on, right? Do they kind of voice any of the challenges or opportunities that this transformation has presented to them? Have you had any guests do that on Rabbit Holes?
What I love about a lot of the people that come onto the show, right, is that they're contributing something into not only into Bitcoin, but they're trying to um, come up with schemes and businesses and ideas that get this signal out there to different people. Like we had the creators of Wiser, an educational gamified app, on trying to sort of like educate people about what Bitcoin is through sort of that kind of platform. And people are trying to think of different ways to put the signal out there. And what we've discussed is my way of trying to get the signal out there. You've got your own way. Rabbit Hole Stories is another way. There are not too many Bitcoin podcasts. The more diverse voices there are from different parts of the world that can contribute to this narrative, so it doesn't become sort of tilted in one direction, the better. And that's kind of like my hope for what Bitcoin can bring is an open and honest conversation of how we can actually club together and change the world, right?
100%. And Ian, this is my last question for you, and I think it's probably the most important one. As the host of Rabbit Hole Stories, what are your plans for the future of the podcast? And is there any upcoming guests or themes that you're particularly excited about exploring?
Mate, honestly, 100%. I'm excited for every single guest that comes on because, like I said earlier, every guest is an opportunity for me to learn more. It gives me a different perspective. There was a guest on recently who was speaking about the Silk Road in China and the economics within China. I had some preconceived ideas and questions about that, and he was able to enlighten me more about the economy in China. We had guests on that spoke about historic struggles in Venezuela for freedom and how they can disappear people and lots of personal stories, right? And every guest that comes on, there's something valuable in it because not only are they showing the world that Bitcoin is diverse, it's got a vast set of opinions and perspectives, and every guest that comes on, and as we expand, we contribute that signal of diversity within the space. And Joel and I are very conscious about trying to get as many different voices as possible from all walks of life. We're not we're not just getting plebs on, we're getting other known names within the space as well. And I think that we are sometimes in danger of celebritizing some people too much, and sort of we should remember that we're all in this together and there's no expert in Bitcoin, and we've all got the same value and the same voice to carry in the same space. So that's how I feel about it. But I'm just excited to continue our weekly show that comes out with a different guest every week. I think this week on Monday, this show's going to probably be out there by the time you see this at the Bitcoin Source. But we've got a guy called Do Not Comply, or DN Comply, and he's anonymous. We spoke to him about his Bitcoin journey. He lives out in Japan. And he's got some very interesting perspectives on the world. So I'm really looking forward to that one going out there as well.
100%. And I'm really excited for Rabbit Hole Stories. Like I said, I've said this numerous times throughout the podcast, but I have to reiterate it again, where you guys definitely have something. Like there's something different about your show. There's something unique about it. And I think that this is the year that people are going to start to really pay attention to Rabbit Hole Stories. I know I've been watching every episode that you guys have put out, and I just think that you're getting better every episode. I think that the conversations are getting more insightful. The questions are more in depth. You guys really do your research on the guests. You don't just get on there and start talking about Bitcoin for 2 hours. Like you really dig into trying to find out exactly what makes that person tick and what makes them really be interested in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin can become a fad, especially when you see the price going up. There's just people that jump on the bandwagon and say, "Oh, I like Bitcoin. It's making me some money." But no, like we're doing this during the bear market. We're doing this during the bull market. It doesn't really matter. We're trying to figure out exactly what makes people want to convert to this paradigm shifting digital asset that everybody's been talking about since 2009. So I'm really grateful and honored to have you on the show, Ian. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to having you back on again. But before you go, please give people all the information that they can get on Rabbit Hole Stories, your social media handles, and any other future endeavors that you might want to tell the audience about.
I do. Again, thank you for having me on. It's been an absolute honor and a privilege. So again, thank you so much, and thank you for the contribution to the ecosystem that you provide as well. And like you watching Rabbit Hole Stories, I'm a fan of the Bitcoin Source also. But in terms of Rabbit Hole Stories, I think the best thing to do is just go to rabbitholestories.co, and in there you'll find all the links that you need and all the platforms that we put the signal out on all the different platforms. So I'll go there. And if you want to sort of reach out to me in any way, then go on to X and just type in question in Bitcoin, and I'm sure you'll see me pop up straight away and engage with my questions. I've been a bit quiet lately because I'm actually really focused on this language piece that I'm working on. So I'm sort of really sort of trying to focus all my energy on that. But I'll be out there making my questions known very shortly, guys. Oh, and one last thing, you commented about the podcast, and one thing that I really value about the dynamic between myself and Joel is that we're both of different generations. I was, born and grew up and now still live in London, and he's Austrian, Swiss, and we can bring in this whole European multi-generational voice within the space. And sort of, I'm more the philosophical, deep thinking type, and he's more the analytical and technical side. So, when we've got a guest on that leans one way or another, that's where we can sort of like take into our strengths, and that's where we sort of really sort of click, I think. But again, Dadu, thank you so much for having.
Yes, Ian, I agree with that, and I think that you hit the nail on the head with the dynamic duo that you and Joel are, and I think that Rabbit Hole Stories is going to really be a next level podcast in the next few years. So once again, Ian, thank you, brother, for being on the Bitcoin Source. Have a good one.